Episode 3, Mixing Romantics with Women's Fiction. Hello, loves. Welcome to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around reading and writing romance. My name is Sarah Gomez. I'm your host, budding romance author, and general love enthusiast. In this episode, I interview Kimberly Packard, an award-winning women's fiction author. She tells us about character relationships in her stories and how it influences her writing.
So welcome, friend, to the show and award-winning author, Kimberly Packard.
Thank you, Sarah. Yay.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about women's fiction and like romantic elements in it. Because I know you have a trilogy, the standalone novel, and a novella. And all are categorized as women's fiction, but you have very strong romantic elements in those books.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because women's fiction, I think it was it was one of those genres where I was like, what the hell is this? Because when I first wrote Phoenix, I didn't know how to categorize it, which was such a rookie mistake as an author. Because they tell you the first thing you need to know is where does your book go on a shelf? And I'm like, yeah, right there in the P's, obviously. But I didn't realize it was deeper than that. So I've kind of done a lot of soul searching and Googling and found out that I write women's fiction. And what that means is, and how it differentiates from romance, is that in women's fiction, the woman's journey, her own journey, is the core element of the plot. Whereas in romance, the core element of the plot is really the couple to eventually get to their happily ever after, the HEA.
Right.
But here's the thing, our lives are not without having relationships. And even with, like in my trilogy, spoiler alert, but, the first couple of books, they don't end up together. And, we've all been in those relationships where it's like, okay, you're the right person, it's just not the right time. And so I think it's something that's out there a lot, and that you just have to kind of say, okay, we'll get together when it's time to get together. And even if they don't get together, romances are, it can be a little bit of a challenge to get through.
Right. And that's why I love about your romantic elements you have in your story. They feel so real because they are we do have these different types of romantic relationships throughout our lives, right person, maybe wrong time, or maybe wrong time, wrong person. It just I like how honest you are with the writing of those. And I've kind of always wondered, do they come fully formed for you? As this, okay, she has this guy, she already know she will have this type of relationship, or as you begin writing, you kind of feel like that's important to integrate into the story?
Yes and no. So with Phoenix, for example, that was my very first novel. That was the one where I didn't know where to shelve it. And I just really wrote that one kind of as the story was coming. And, when she gets to the small town of Phoenix, and there she kind of hooks up with the cop, and at this point, Amanda is on the run. She had to take the fall for her ex-boyfriend's crimes. So it's like, wow, dating a cop when you're a criminal on the lam, not the smartest thing she's done.
That's intense too.
It's pretty intense. But, I think once I kind of realized, oh wait, the muse knows so much more than I do, that what that did was it made me realize that, he also had a struggle, once he understood more about her past, and to realize, she made mistakes, but she wasn't a bad person. That became something that kind of sometimes drove them apart and sometimes brought them together. So once I kind of figured out what I was doing with that series, and kind of realized, and there was a little bit of a love triangle with it, because Amanda's ex does show back up. And, we all have those exes that you're like, God, if I get in the same room with you, I might kill you, but I'm going to give you a kiss right before I do,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. We have just such mixed emotions about these people. And I think, at some point she realized that, she and Josh, in some ways they were a match, they weren't meant to always be together, but there were some elements of each other that definitely clicked.
Right. And I do love, like I said, I love the idea of like you integrating the different, because unfortunately, I think in English language, we only have one term for love. And like you integrate all these different types of relationships, like the
Yeah.
relationships with the ex. And like, again, I may feel like I gotta kill you, but like at the same time, it's a very complicated type of relationship, or like the new budding romance.
Tully has some thoughts about
Oh,
dog, romance with dogs,
well, I mean, like, but let's for real. Let's talk about the vortex. Your life is
Oh
not
yeah.
vortex. Like the real love story is
The real love
Nimbus.
story is between the girl and her dog.
And
Yeah.
yes, and Elena.
Yes, because I mean, honestly, your dog's always going to be there for you, man.
I know. Like
But
they never judge. They're always there.
yeah. Well, and in that one, the love story there was between her and Seth, another meteorologist, and
Mhm.
she was drawn to him, but she had, her mission. She had to finish her dissertation. She had to uncover, because, the way the story starts is that she starts having flashbacks of these repressed memories, and she's kind of like, well, what's locked away in my head? And she then realized the storms are the trigger. And so she starts putting herself closer and closer to these storms. And, you know, starting a romance out in the field while there's storm season isn't always the best idea either. So, really for them, their relationship came together as they spent time out there, on the field and running into each other. But, he would infuriate her. He knew how to push her buttons, and she knew how to push his, actually. So that was a fun one to write.
Yeah. And for kind of like the romantic elements, when you kind of put them in there, how do you know when like to go, if it's gone like too far? Like I remember I was reading a book recently, and I felt like I missed some pages. I think the author just kind of skipped one thing to the next, like just in order to advance the relationship pretty quickly. Like how do you know you feel like you've done more of an authentic job, I guess, kind of fleshing out that relationship as opposed to like checking boxes?
It's and it's funny because I was reading something about this recently, and that, a lot of times on your first draft, you tend to be very kind to your characters. And so you sometimes will say, oh, I'm going to get them together the first time they meet, love at first sight. And you kind of go in there maybe thinking that, but then, a first draft is never a final draft, and you work on it and you work on it and work on it. I know, sorry. But and I think sometimes it's a push and pull. It's, sometimes I feel like I push them together, and they may have a moment together, and then I have to pull them apart, because it's like, hang on guys, you're not ready yet. The reader's not ready yet. If you're writing romance, there are several beats in a romance that, they need to have their first kiss at a certain point. They need to, hop in bed together at a certain point. If you're writing sweet romance, you skip that part or the door closes, those kind of things. So, but with women's fiction, I think you don't have to follow those rules quite as much. Like in Vortex, Seth and Elena never actually had sex in the book. I'm sure they did. They're probably off somewhere, holed up being bunnies in the quarantine period. But it's just, it didn't feel like it moved the plot along. There was the makeout scene,
Yep.
but that was interrupted by his ex. Right. And so, they just never really kind of got it together in the book, but, they do eventually. But then with Phoenix, I did actually have a few love scenes in that one because it felt like it was necessary.
Awesome. Yeah, because I love the like I said, I love how you push them. There's a lot of push and pull there, a lot of great dynamics between the characters, and they're always so well developed. All the relationships are. So there is that kind of fine line between like how far do you go and like when do you go. So and I feel like you walk that perfectly.
Oh, thank you. Well, and sometimes, like I said, the inclination is to give them what they want.
Right.
They're like children, and you're kind of like, you know what, you want that Atari. I'm totally dating myself, but I'm joking. The Nintendo Switch. Okay. So It's like, you want the Switch? Okay, I'll give it to you. But then you realize you just gave in. They didn't have to earn it. And, really your characters have to earn everything they get at the end, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah. And that's something, we don't like, I think that really helps with like really bringing out the best in the book is when you kind of let the characters discover that for themselves. Like when, you kind of keep them in line, but you let them earn that first, like you said, like earn that achievement.
I know.
So, and I did notice, so like you mentioned it earlier, but like, so Phoenix is about basically a criminal on the run, and she does fall for a cop. In Vortex, there is that they meet in the field, and the meteorologist and the storm chaser meet in the field. So you put these really dramatic situations.
I know. I live such a boring life.
Like what draws you to that, to like oh my gosh, we got to put them in the most insane situation so they can meet.
I know, right? It's the ultimate meet cute, I guess. But well, like Vortex, for example, that actually came to me in just this quick vision. And I was watching, here in Texas, we have a lot of storms that come through. So I was watching the news one night after some thunderstorms, and it was the weirdest thing. I just kind of had this vision of a little girl who was found in some rubble, and she didn't know who she was or where she came from. And it was just such a weird little thing. Like that never actually happened, I don't think, on TV, but I just kind of had that like flash behind my eyes, and it's like, wow, who's that little girl? And so then I kind of started thinking about it and letting it, as Stephen King always says, the boys in the basement start working on it. And I was like, oh, she grows up to be a storm chaser. Okay, interesting. And I just kind of started putting it together, and I realized, she needs to have her equal, because Elena's a really, no pun intended, she's kind of a force of nature. And what I loved about her and Seth, if you think about them as storms personified, she's very much kind of a tornado. She's got dark hair, and she's kind of this swirling ball of energy, whereas he's a lot more laid back, and he grew up on the Gulf Coast. And while he's kind of got some anger, and we see it a little bit with his ex, he's a pretty calm guy, and so they balance each other. And I think it was one of those things that when I was kind of coming up with the story, and actually I don't think I came up with the story, I think the story came to me. And that's a whole woo-woo conversation we can have later. But as the story is unveiling itself to me, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So she has a love story in this as well. And they just seem to really be a perfect pair together.
Right. Well, and it totally made sense too. The way you wrote it just made sense that she would need that in her kind of her journey to kind of discover more about herself and things like that. And like you said, she was such a strong personality that I feel like they complemented each other very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And she definitely met her match with him.
I was going to ask you, how's quarantine been for your writing muses?
Oh gosh, it's funny. So I kind of was in this weird place of, I had Dyer's Club, my next novel, kind of done. I had edits that I was making. Full disclosure, Sarah and I are in the same critique group. So I've had critiques from you guys that I was kind of going back in and putting those in. So I've actually spent a good chunk of my time editing, not really writing new words, but I've kind of got that. I've got it in a place where I'm setting it aside for a little bit longer. I've got Christine's edits coming to me actually today, probably.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'll kind of do another pass at it, but I'm actually going to dig back into writing. What would this be? Number 6, The Arrangement, which is a story of 2 women who, it's kind of like Milli Vanilli. It's 2 women who share a role of a singer. One's the face and one's the voice.
Ooh.
So I'm going to get back into writing that one.
Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Thank you. So what about you? Have you been writing?
I have been writing, yes, more.
Yay.
And then while I've had this kind of brief time off, I have been focusing on the podcast and like audiobooks and different things, kind of doing a mishmash of things, if you will, just to hold my attention.
Yeah, it's a good time to clear stuff off the to-do list.
Exactly. So, and spending a lot of times, like you mentioned, with the dog.
Yes.
A lot of like puppy time. So that's always good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's back asleep now. So I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Perfect.
Squirrel walked by.
I know. Oh, dang those squirrels.
I know, right?
So I know this is always it's such a very broad question.
Mm-hmm.
But what does the writing process look like for you?
I think it's still somewhat evolving. Like I said, Phoenix, I totally pantsed that sucker. And actually, I don't remember if I've ever told you this story, but when I finished writing Phoenix, I had no writers group. I wasn't part of anything. It was, years and years ago. And I kind of was just like, oh, I'm just going to write this. I've always wanted to do that. And kind of didn't really know what I was doing. And so I finished it, and it came in at 120,000 words. It's a monster. Yeah, it was a monster. And I Googled, average length of an adult novel, and I was like, oh, wow, I have some trimming to do. So I got it down to like 93,000 words, and it's like, oh, wow. But that one I pantsed. Pardon Falls, the second book, I also kind of pants, but I think I rewrote that sucker like 11, 12 times, because it was, for me, it was a learning experience of how to just let a story be a story and not try to force it into a certain size. I kind of jokingly called that my accidental trilogy, because again, not knowing a whole lot about stuff, I kind of left it with a little bit of a cliffhanger. But then I was like, wait, no, she's not done yet. There's more to the story. She needs to bring home Josh. She needs to do this. And that's when I kind of got a little serious about, okay, I got to plot this sucker out. And so it took me a little while to get Pardon Falls done, mostly because I rewrote it 12 times. But then when it came to Prospera Pass, the third one and the final of the trilogy, I had learned to plot. Alexandra Sokolov. I took a class from her and learned some plotting techniques. Ooh. And so that really helped me, and I kind of like doing that. And so I wrote Prospera Pass in 5 months, and it pretty much came out fully formed. Like, I know I went back through and maybe tweaked some stuff, but there was not a whole lot of, I think I had learned to really, like I was saying earlier, don't baby your characters.
Yes.
Oh God, I tortured those guys. I felt so bad. Like literally in some cases.
That is true. I remember some of those chapters reading and be like, ooh, she went dark. It's the dark Kim.
Yeah. I'd leave those chapters out for my husband to read. It's like, take out the trash, or that's what's going to happen. But no, so that one, and I think that because I was unafraid to put those guys through the ringer, and this is weird, and it's going to sound again woo-woo, but I think I knew they were up for the challenge. I'd spent enough time with these characters that I was like, I know this is going to hurt you a whole lot worse than it's going to hurt me, but I know you can deal with it. I know you can get past it. And so I think that's why that one came out so quickly.
Yeah. 3 books deep, you should be able to understand, okay, I know their limitations. I know enough about them to where I know that they can handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do that. Yeah. So I do that now. I still kind of do this, kind of storyboard it in a sense out. But then I also allow myself a detour if I'm writing something. I'm like, where did that come from? Because again, sometimes the story knows more than I do. The muse knows more than I do. And it's just like, okay, I'm going to follow this little trail. And usually when I storyboard it, I don't get super detailed about this is going to happen. They're going to walk into a cafe. She's going to order this kind of coffee, and she's going to have this conversation. I mean, it might be something as simple as, character shows up at a bar and has a conversation with someone and gets a piece of information. And throughout that conversation, something else could happen.
Right. And that actually makes me think too. So how much does it actually, from the genesis of maybe storyboarding your idea, how much does your book actually change, or any of the relationships actually with the character change, or at all, if at all?
Some does, for sure. And with Dyer's Club, I honestly didn't realize. So Dyer's Club, I'll kind of give the quick blurb about what that one is, because that one's not out yet. Hopefully by the end of the year. Yeah, I'm excited. It's a very different book than anything I've ever written before. It follows quite a few characters, not a small group. It's a group.
And can you give us the pitch? I love the pitch, like the Breakfast Club pitch.
Oh yeah. So it's the Breakfast Club meets the Bucket List, and it's basically a group of people who come together for their dying adventures. They're strangers. They don't know each other. there's a guy, Jimmy Dyer, who runs this really interesting travel company
Mm-hmm.
where he takes people who have terminal illnesses on trips and he brings them together. So you really are kind of thrown together. You know, it's a fantasy island, a Love Boat type thing where it's like people that don't know each other are now forced together. And, you know, they form relationships, they form friendships, some form, you know, love interests. But I didn't realize that Jimmy and Charlotte, Charlotte's probably the main character of that one. I didn't realize they were going to form such a close alliance and friendship. And that one, while there is a love story, that one is really probably 100% women's fiction, where with Charlotte, I mean, her journey isn't a love story, not in a pure romantic sense.
Right. Not in like what we would think like traditional sense.
Yeah.
Love story.
I mean, she does find love. She really, you know, and I don't want to give it away, but she absolutely does find love, but not in the traditional way. Oh, you should have heard that.
Oh, he sounded so ferocious.
I know.
Was it another squirrel?
Probably. Who knows? Who knows?
Oh no.
Truck drove by.
Oh Lord.
I don't know. It could be anything. And really, he's been really good during the quarantine time. Like most of the time, he just hangs out under my desk. But
yeah, I've seen the pictures you posted of him just like hanging out in your office with you, just chilling.
Yeah, and I feel bad sometimes if he's under there a while and I'm not thinking about it. I may like you know change how I've crossed my legs and I'll kick him in the head. I was like, But I swear this dog does not feel pain. If he feels pain, he doesn't tell us. Like he will. He's running off somewhere. But like you know, for example. Last night, Colby was coming in from the backyard. He didn't realize Tully was following him in and he shut the door on his head. Doorbell.
Oh, dang.
And Tully's just like, oh, hey, that was my head. Okay, let's keep going. You know?
Hey. Just like not phased, not in the least.
Not phased. I've never heard him yelp.
Wow.
Whereas our other dog, a leaf would hit him and he'd be like, I'm maimed.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. So I was just basically getting to like friendships, the friendships you have in your novels, because like they are so powerful. And I feel like I always feel like I know something like a Heath and Vortex, like who's like her like best friend and kind of like academic partner. Like I've had those guys, like those friends in college, like that help you like shape who you are. And I just kind of are. So are those like ever things that you base on real friendships or real relationships of any sort? Or is that something that, like I said, like comes kind of inspirations other places?
You know, I think everything is based on an experience that we've had as writers. You know, I think we're just these kind of like giant sponges. We're just a bunch of SpongeBobs and we absorb, you know, so much. And so, I mean, you know, it's the same as any type of close partnership, friendship. What I love about Heath and Elena is, you know, if anybody wasn't really paying attention, you would think that they were brother and sister, or perhaps they were dating because their relationship was so close. But you know, it was purely platonic, and it was, you know, again, he was a lot like Seth, you know, someone that calmed her down, settled her down, but she also pushed him to, you know, get outside his comfort zone sometimes. But I think that's just, you know, friendships are so important to us as humans. And, you know, that was one of the things with the Phoenix trilogy. I kept cutting away Amanda's friendships, you know, and that first, you know, in the early part of Phoenix, when she escapes from Chicago and, you know, is chasing after Josh, she has nobody but herself to rely on.
Right.
And so that I thought was really interesting because, and now I think there's people that kind of are seeing that, you know, in this quarantine life thing, but, you know, having to, you know, really rely on herself a lot. You know, with Phoenix, she did, you know, when she got into Pardon Falls, and she had some friends, she had some allies. But then there came a part where, you know, David and Josh had to rely on each other. And then when we get to Prospera Pass, she's back alone again. And so I think, you know, the absence of friendship can be just as impactful as having that friend. Because you have to dig in really, really deep.
Right. And there are some journeys I know that you can only go alone. Like you have to do it on your own in order for you to grow, or in order for you to learn something, or just, it's just something so like I said, intense that you have to, it's just something you have to figure out for you.
Yeah.
But like I said, I love the whole friendships and aspect of it, just because those are so influential to us as human beings, since we are relational kind of creatures.
Yeah.
Also, really quick though about Vortex, again, back to Nimbus, because I remembered something.
Oh, yeah.
So was Nimbus, because you mentioned about Tully and, you know, your last dog, Charlie.
Yeah.
I know he tragically passed away early, but was Nimbus based around a real dog like Charlie, or was it part of anything, or just?
So here's the funny thing. I think he was a little bit based on Charlie. Okay, this is really kind of a funny moment, and you'll laugh at me. But when I sat down to start writing Vortex, and again, you know, I kind of loosely plotted it out. I had my storyboard. And I think of the storyboard as it's a map, it's a road map. And it's like, okay, sometimes I might take the interstate, but every now and then I might see that roadside attraction, like world's largest cowboy boots exit, you know, right. And I go see what those are. And, you know, so I leave myself open for those, but I'm sitting next to my husband. I think we're sitting outside. It was like a gorgeous day, and I'm sitting in the backyard, and I'm writing the first chapter. And I get to the part in that very first chapter where Elena stands up, and she, you know, they realize the storm's forming not too far away, and they have to kind of pick up and move. And she whistles for her dog, and he comes bounding. And I had no clue that was going to happen. It just popped out. And I stopped, and I looked at my computer where I had just written that, and I actually spoke out loud, "You have a dog?" And I think I have headphones on or something, because, you know, I was listening to music, and my husband thought I was talking to someone. And he looked at me, and he goes, of course you have a dog. I mean, he's sitting right there beside you. And I kind of was like, all right, Elena, you better take care of him. And I actually said that to her. It was, you know, yes, we talk to our imaginary friends as writers, but
it's very true. Yes.
It's very true.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I do think there's that relationship between an owner and their dog, and just being able to, you know, read their body language so well. And, you know, unlike Nimbus, Charlie was not a fan of storms. Bless his little heart. He was a 90-pound yellow lab golden retriever mix. And I think that's why, you know, I made Nimbus a golden, just to, you know, because, you know, there's nothing better than that big golden happy face. If we had a storm come in, poor Charlie would try to, you know, shove that big body into the smallest space he could find. So that was kind of where their similarities, you know, lay. Now, Tully, on the other hand, this little dude, he wants to go play in the storms. So he's probably more like Nimbus in that sense.
Yeah, but that's just so sweet. But I, you know, I had that moment the other day where you write something and you don't know what you wrote until you read it back, and then you're just like, what happened? Like, I had a character called one of my characters a nickname, and I didn't know he was going to have a nickname, but I guess he does. So that's always to me, that's always, I feel like I'm in the zone when I do that, but then I'm almost letting my characters take over.
Yeah. And it's it's such a cool place to be, into that area where you're almost like in a trance when you're like really, really writing. And, you know, you're seeing the movie in your head, and you're trying just to type as fast as you can. I can always tell when I'm super zoning, because if I go back and reread it later, I'm like skipping words, and I'm like, wait, no, I must have been flowing, because I just couldn't keep up with it. But, and it's real interesting, because my dad is a knife maker, and we've had these conversations about when he's in a zone making a knife, because he approaches it more from the artistic, not the, I mean, they're definitely utility pieces, but it's not just a piece of metal on a handle to go, you know, cut something. He actually takes the artistry of it. That he's like, yeah, I can get into a zone. Time will go by, and you don't realize it's there, it's gone. And you're so in your head that you don't realize what's going on around you. And it's almost like you're just this conduit for the story.
Right. And like the story is just kind of coming out through you. So you're just like typing it as fast as you can.
Yeah. And so that's when these, like, you know, nicknames will come out, or, you know, the facts that they have a dog, or, you know, like in Dyer's Club, you know, again, it's the story, I don't want to give away the ending, but the way it ended, I didn't actually see that as that was going to be the ending.
So that was never planned.
I you know, I knew she was going to be okay, but I didn't realize that that was going to happen until I started getting a little bit closer in. it wasn't one of those, like,
Ah.
I got to this last chapter and like, so what are we going to do here? But no, I mean, I kind of was like, oh, I see where she's going. I see what her love story is. And again, it doesn't have to be a romantic love. So
Exactly. And it made perfect sense for her arc. So I thought that was like from the beginning, I thought that was like your plan. So to know that she kind of, or that's kind of where they led you. That's always fun. It's always fun to see, because I feel like they know kind of what they're doing. And kind of let them go, but like keep them in line a little bit, but let them go for the most part.
Yeah, let them go, but it's like, okay, but I'm gonna let your leash run out a little bit longer. We'll use the dog analogy, but hey, I still got the leash. Go. But and actually, interesting enough about that book, Jimmy was the character I met first.
Really? I thought it was Charlotte.
He actually came to me, and like, how you have those waking dreams where you start waking up on like a Saturday morning, your alarm's not screeching. And I'm having this waking dream, and I'm sitting there with Jimmy, and he says to me, everybody dies. The lucky ones have fun doing it. And I was like,
that's a tagline right there.
What? Yeah, and I actually use that in the book.
That's
and
amazing.
I was like, wait, what? Who are you?
Amazing.
And I had to like, get up and grab my journal, and it just like, I just journaled a bunch of it out. And, some of that stuff is not in the book. It was just, the random journalings, but really it was Jimmy was the first one I met. And then I started kind of going, okay, who else is here? And when Charlotte came onto the screen, so to say, I was like, oh, you're actually the main character. You have much more of a journey than Jimmy does.
Yeah. Wow. And I know we've talked about this before, like me, you and Chrissy and Susie and like all of our kind of retreat group friends have all talked about how the best ideas come when you're like dreaming, when you're asleep or in the shower.
Oh yeah.
So do you keep the notebook by your bed just for that reason?
Yep. Oh, I've joked that there was one night I woke up in the middle of the night, and I think it was one of those like, I'm tired, I'm going to go back to sleep. But I know that whatever I was dreaming was going to be the next great American novel, and I completely forgot it. I don't know. I may be overinflating it, but I woke up and I was like, that's the best idea ever. I don't know what it was. I couldn't even tell you.
You didn't write it down?
No, because I don't think I had my journal next to me. And
oh no.
I was just like, I'm so tired. And I just rolled back over. It's like, I'll remember it in the morning.
And you never do. I know I never do either. I think of things great. I'm just like, I'll remember that. I'm going to remember that later. And nope.
Yeah. Then the next best thing is the recorder app on your phones. I've recorded several things.
Yes.
And if I were to accidentally send that to you, you'd be like, what in the world is this? It's like total
Kim
ramble.
has lost her mind.
That makes no sense. But when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that means.
Gotcha. So. Where can people find you or find all these great books that you've been talking about as far as like Vortex and the Phoenix trilogy?
Thank you. So I'm on Kindle Unlimited. So if you're a KU reader, they're on Amazon. So as we can find the ebooks. Phoenix is audio. I had a small publisher when that came out, and she did audio. I have not done the audio on the other ones yet, so I need to catch up on those. And you can buy the print books online wherever you buy print. And then I have a website that I update maybe twice a year. It's KimberlyPackard.com. It's a very simple site. It doesn't need a lot of updating, thankfully.
Perfect. And then they can also find you on like Twitter and Instagram. And
places, Twitter,
right?
Instagram, Facebook. I'll be honest, I always forget about my Facebook page. I'm not on that one quite as much. If you follow me on Instagram, you're going to see a lot of pictures of the dog and cat, and usually when I'm drinking. And
perfect.
Which has been a lot lately.
I just need that in my life right now.
The quarantine life, all the drinking. Yeah.
Thank you so much to Kim for being on the show, and be sure to check her out on Kindle Unlimited and Amazon. I'd love to connect with you, and here's how. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at @RomanceTheStory. Book recommendations for this episode: Phoenix by Kimberly Packard and Vortex by Kimberly Packard.